Hello friends again, Baba here with another episode of this Revitalized Zen YouTube series. This is already video number 8, titled, what's the title? Enlightenment, don't talk about it. One YouTuber who I followed for several years now is American Zen teacher and author Brad Warner, the author of Hardcore Zen. He's had a YouTube channel for I think many years now, and I've kind of followed him on and off. He has brilliant stuff there, so I recommend everybody to follow him, subscribe to his channel. And he had posted a video. What was it? The title of the video was, just a moment, what's even the point of enlightenment? And this question, he presented it, it had been asked of him, and he was giving his commentary about it. And one thing that Brad discussed in his video is how awakening or enlightenment, Kensho, Satori, these essential path experiences are not openly discussed in the so-called traditional Zen. And when I said traditional Zen, there is a reason for that, and I'll come back to that, come back to this later. But I didn't actually watch his video in full, but I watched it to the point where he said that, it is commonly accepted and understood that it's not possible to describe Buddha nature or awakening experiences, Kenshos, where you awaken to this nature, except through metaphors, metaphorical language. And it's widely accepted that this is problematic, and because of this being bound to metaphors, because Buddha nature couldn't be well explained in lucid, clear, understandable manner, it automatically creates false impressions and confusions. And I guess this is the main reason why in mainstream Dharma this whole discussion is kept strictly between teacher and student, and it's not openly discussed except between Dharma brothers and sisters, practitioners who are really good friends, but it's not discussed in the community, and definitely not discussed in the culture of Zen Buddhism and Zen Dharma. So I want to share my experience of this. I often make this, a little transcript that I follow in these videos, and I made one for this, and I want to go through this and share my experience. Again, I've been a full-time Dharma teacher, mainly teaching Tantrayana or Vajrayana for nearly 17 years now, so it's been a chunk of time. I don't know how many retreats and how many events I've taught, but plenty, let's say like that. And the way how we have done things in our Sangha, the tantric side of my work is called Amrita Mandala Sangha. And then this Revitalized Zen is another aspect of my work. The way how we have done it in Amrita Mandala is according to this, in modern time, in our time, it's called Principles of Pragmatic Dharma. And I'll come back to this later by reading a couple of pages from Vincent Horn, this American Buddhist meditation teacher who has a brilliant article about this. But my point that I'm making in this video is that it is actually helpful, even if we might struggle at first to explain what is happening in our practice, even if it might be difficult to verbalize our experiences, including Kensho, Satori, awakening, enlightenment. I'm just using a bunch of words here. I don't think awakening and enlightenment are exactly the same thing. I think awakening is just a major shift, but enlightenment, I use that word only for full enlightenment, when one becomes a living Buddha. But anyway, my experience is, the experience in our Sangha has been that it is immensely helpful, even though it might be difficult at first to verbalize and explain. Buddha nature is actually really simple. It's not that complex at all. On my videos I have spoken about the 3 basic characteristics of Buddha nature that directly correlate with the 3 dantians, the 3 tandens. The Tandien in the head, the Tandien in the heart, and Dantien in the belly. So I've spoken about these 3 basic characteristics: clarity, softness, kindness, love, compassion, and then groundedness, stability, peacefulness in the belly. So there you already have a number of terms that are very clear and understandable. Okay, and so it is possible, it is definitely possible to describe what happens when we have awakening experience and experiences. It is possible, but it's a completely different discussion and it's like a cultural habit, and I think it's a really bad habit that this is not discussed, that it's hush-hushed. It's not discussed. It's kind of like I remember some movie vaguely in my head where this was maybe a horror movie. I don't like horror movies, but I do like sci-fi. But maybe it was a horror movie or something, and there was some monster or something like that pestering a village, and the villagers, they had this habit that we never mention his name, we never discuss the monster because it enrages the monster or something like this, that it has negative consequences, harmful consequences. And I never understood this in Dharma, in Zen, and my experience of all these years having done the exact opposite perfectly testifies for the immense value of openly sharing and openly discussing between teacher-student, between all students, and culturally it is immensely valuable and beneficial to all. Why? Well, I don't think Dharma is any different from any other art or science or any other field of expertise. But there is this really strange view, which I will get to it in a moment, but that is actually not the traditional way of it is not traditional habit to not speak of Dharma. So I always found it weird that we can discuss about art. I have paintings here on the walls of the center. We can discuss about science. I'm a total moron when it comes to scientific understanding, but I understand enough to say that I have absolutely no clue about the fine points about physics and chemistry and quantum physics and stuff like this. Nevertheless, among the experts of those fields, experts of science, art, mathematics, anything, there is discussion, there is talk. And it's very easy to understand when we think of secular fields of expertise. When we go to school when we are 6, 7 years old, we start learning to read, to write, mathematics, biology, all kinds of things, because the teacher explains us stuff. And if we don't understand, if the kids don't understand, we can ask, teacher, I didn't understand it, please explain it. And it's a teacher's responsibility to explain it for that student and for all students to clarify it. But my point is that there is this open discussion, and through this open discussion of open learning, everybody learns. We all learn these secular skills in this way, although I don't remember much about school mathematics, never really had any interest in sciences, but my point is that why would Dharma be different? Why would Dharma be different? When the whole path is about, it is said that it's about becoming a Buddha, realizing our own inherent Buddha nature that we all inherently already have. And through our practices, through our method, we gradually realize and establish this inherent Buddha nature. We realize that we are wakeful, sober-minded, soft-hearted, grounded, naturally, spontaneously peaceful beings. Why would it be a problem to discuss it? It makes zero sense. I remember this was over 10 years ago. I have an acquaintance who is a European gentleman who is a Dharma heir in a certain Rinzai Zen Buddhist Japanese Rinzai Zen lineage. He received a full transmission from a Japanese Roshi who taught in the US. And this friend of mine, this Zen teacher, he, after 30 years of practicing Rinzai Zen, he started practicing Tibetan Chokchen with a Tibetan Lama. I don't actually remember which Lama it was, but after him studying for maybe a year or two, I remember him saying the following: while Zen masters say weird things, Chokchen people actually explain things. We are all, anybody who's read Zen literature, there is this tradition of, like this teacher said, saying weird things or saying things in a way that don't make sense for the rational mind. And it is one expression, but it is possible to express, it is possible to practice Zen and Dharma by actually explaining things as well. So in the video of Brad Warner, he mentioned Philip Kaplow's book, The 3 Pillars of Zen, which was also one of the first books that I read back in the day when I started to practice. And that book contains, I think it's 8 accounts of Japanese and Western Zen practitioners describing their practice before and after an awakening experience. before and after Kensho. And there is actually also in that book, there is this brilliant account of this young, very ill lady called Yaeko Iwasaki, who was a daughter of, I think she was a daughter of like a car factory owner, so like a daughter of in a very wealthy family. And there are letters of Yaeko Iwasaki close to her death. I think she passed away at 25 years old or something like that. She was very ill, and then within the last couple of months or weeks, she had a series of awakening experiences. And she was sending letters back and forth with Daiyun Sogaku Harada Roshi, who was really famous Soto Zen Roshi of his time, and Tangen Roshi, who I've mentioned often on these videos, was a Dharma heir of Daiyun Sogaku Harada Roshi. But in Kaplo's 3 Pillars of Zen, there are these 8 awakening accounts, and also Yaeko Iwasaki's letters with Sogaku Harada Roshi. So, do take a look if you haven't read the book. But I remember reading that book back in the day, and I think I had read like the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying and some similar bestsellers. But I remember reading Kaplo's book, those accounts, and feeling like, oh, that's what I want. That's what I've been looking for. This is what I want to pursue. And how I started to practice Zen, that's another story with other details. But then I started practicing Zen in a local Zen center in Helsinki, Finland, in Sambo Kyodan lineage. And I've actually seen this many times over the years, that somebody who's new comes to a Dharma group, be it Zen group or some other form of a Dharma, they come to this environment of practice and Dharma very excited and inspired. Very excited and inspired to learn. They might be like me. Many times people are like me, that we have heard of this awakening, this matter of enlightenment that Buddha Dharma, Buddhism is about. And then you go there, and there's maybe a teacher or senior practitioners together having tea after sitting sessions. And then when a new face asks a question about awakening or Kensho, and have you people had it, respectfully asking, how many of you have had it, or how can I expect, when or how I could have it. I've seen it so many times, and I remember seeing it myself when I asked this question, that people become bothered, like uncomfortably bothered, might blush, or they might kind of give this nervous laughter, nervous chuckle, and some people get really upset or even arrogant towards the one who is asking about this. And it is again, if we think of this topic from the perspective of, that school teacher in front of the class and students, and then some of these students have been, let's say, have been in the school for 4 or 5 years, some have been 10 years, and somebody who's a new student, 6-7-year-old kid, comes in and asks about some question about sciences or mathematics or whatever. But then people get really, those other senior students would get nervous or start to chuckle, ho 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 ho, yeah. No. This really arrogant response to it. I've seen this so many times, and I know people who have seen exact the same. I've seen the same when people ask Dharma teachers, senseis, roshis, rinpoches, lamas, what the meaning of emptiness is. So please, Lama, please, Roshi, can you explain what emptiness means, please? Because I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I don't understand how this awakening experiences, kenshos are supposed to, how they two relate. And then there might be that same arrogant laughter, nervousness, and something brief is said just to brush aside the question. I've seen this so many times that it is really bad. It is really, really bad. Like I often say, you know, I am training teachers and instructors, acharyas in Amrita Mandala. This will probably happen in time in Revitalized Zen, that I will train teachers and instructors. But I've often said that the way how to measure if a teacher is really authentic teacher of Buddha Dharma is not by asking whether he or she has a certificate or a formal authorization. A sign of authentic teachership, understanding of Dharma, is not whether there has been this formal ceremony that somebody authorizes, somebody from the lineage authorizes somebody as a teacher. We already know that it is not the case, that it doesn't work like that. And this was actually discussed by Buddha Shakyamuni, that you shouldn't base your trust on any of these secondary factors. So somebody who might be has been a Roshi for 20, 30, 40 years, it's not necessarily the case that somebody who we assume to be an expert or specialist actually is one. So, yeah, I encountered this hush-hush attitude when I started practicing Zen in Europe, in my home country, in Finland. And then I encountered it again when I stayed in a Rinzai Zen temple in Japan for about 9 months. And then during my time in Japan, I was there only for 1 year. So my stay was pretty short, but intense. But I went to sessions in few other places as well. And in all of these places, there was this hush-hush attitude. Those are not the questions that we ask. Those questions, that discussion was not to be had openly. So, that's simply how it is. I mentioned Daiyun Sogaku Harada Roshi, the master of Tangen Roshi. Daiyun Sogaku Harada was an abbot of Hoshinji Monastery. It's in the village of, I visited there, but I don't remember the name of the village. But Tangen Roshi's and Sogaku Harada Roshi's temples are like 400-500 meters away from each other. And Tangen Roshi was the abbot of Bukkokuchi, his temple, for 50-60 years, something like that. That's where I met Tangen Roshi. But something interesting that it's probably mentioned in Philip Kaplow's 3 Pillars of Zen, but something that Daiyun Sogaku Harada Roshi, what he practiced when he led sessions in his temple, or maybe actually this is mentioned in Omori Sogen Roshi's biography written by Dogen Hosokawa Roshi. So, because Omori Sogen Roshi, my Dharma grandfather, he also went to do Sheshin with Daiun Sogaku Harada in Hoshinji Monastery before taking up studies with Seki Seisetsu Roshi of Tenryuji. Omori Sogen Roshi was Seki Seisetsu Roshi's Dharma heir. But one thing that Sogaku Harada Roshi did was, I think, for the purpose of demystification and removing the mystery around awakening experiences, they would announce the names of those who have had awakenings during a sesshin retreat on the final day of the retreat. So they would say the names of those who had an opening. And I thought it was very interesting. I didn't think about anything special about it. While at the same time, seeing these groups where there was this hush-hush attitude. We never say the name of the monster type of thing. And then years went by. I stopped practicing Zen. I got completely disillusioned about the effectiveness of traditional Zen, having done plenty of Rinzai Zen sessions and Soto sessions. I felt that this doesn't work. This doesn't work at all. Despite of sitting day and night, literally, this doesn't work. Despite of following the instructions to the letter, instructions received one-on-one from very experienced, like a long-time teaching experience possessing Roshis, I had to say, this doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And then I started practicing Tantrayana, Vajrayana, Tantra, and then I learned that actually many ancient Buddhist masters openly spoke about their attainments. Even Buddha Shakyamuni spoke about his attainments. These days people would say that Buddha Shakyamuni made a claim of attainment. But it's not really claim is not the right word. It is simply openly saying that this has happened to me and that I have finished the path. I have often thought about this because lots of people, they get completely confused when somebody says that, oh yeah, I've had a number of awakening experiences. Some people get completely lost or upset or angry when somebody says that. And I always found it extremely strange. It's kind of like, if you think of students in a medical school who are training to become medical doctors. It is not a problem for a student after 3 years of medical studies to say that, yeah, I've done 3 years of study. I already have quite a bit of knowledge and skills and little bit of expertise in this field. And certainly when we see medical doctors, they have no problem saying, it's not a claim, but saying that, yes, I'm a trained medical doctor. This is my profession. This is my expertise. What do you want to know? Right? So, my view started to change when I learned that Buddha Shakyamuni and many masters of tantric tradition, they have openly said what they have practiced and what they have attained. Sometimes in a very brief manner, just a couple of sentences we can find from different classical sources, scriptures. But nevertheless, of course, it is possible that when we have, for example, in what's the name of that book? Kunjet Gyalpo, that was translated into English by Chogyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche. Somewhere in that book there is a chapter of these ancient, very early Dzogchen masters, one after the other, page after page, who say that, yeah, I did the practice and I graduated the practice, or something similar. And they don't say it in a romantical or poetic or a vague manner, but very, as a matter of fact statement. So this whole policy of, we don't speak about the monster, it started happening sometime afterwards. And even if somebody don't like this idea, fine, you can continue not talking about these things, but there are ancient masters who did this. Or somebody might have a problem with, this was never done in the context of Zen. Okay, it may never have been written down, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been done. Or, even if texts like Kunjet Gyalpo, they only say a couple of sentences, these different masters saying few sentences, we would assume, it would be easy to assume that they actually spoke about it extensively with their students, with their sanghas. So why not discuss the most essential matters of the whole path? Why not discuss? Of course, if kenshos, if these awakenings are rare, people don't really have them. I've seen this too in traditional Zen communities, that practice communities are like mini samsaras. It's a samsaric, it's its own samsaric world, and there are always quarrels, and people don't like each other. They like somebody and have a couple of friends in the sangha, but I don't think a sangha exists where everybody is, hunky-dory with everybody. There are people like that too, who come along with everybody, but it's like a mini samsara. And I know, that people get jealous, envious when somebody has what is considered a special experience. Especially deep kensho, especially deep opening. People do get envious and jealous about that. But even if they do, that's not a reason to not discuss it. Because if it was discussed, maybe those who actually get jealous and envious would more effectively use their envious and jealousy for practice, for further illumination, and they would also get information and some know-how how this person had the opening, if it was openly shared, right? So again, this would be commonsensical to do. About the rarity of kensho, I remember when I was in that monastery now 20 years ago, I spoke, one of my good friends in the monastery, he was this young monk, we are still good friends. He spoke of this former Zen monk who had lived there for maybe 10-15 years. Can't actually remember the name of that Zen monk, but I never met him. But my friend, he knew him well. He left soon before I arrived in the monastery. But I remember him telling me of this senior Zen monk that he once had this awakening, this Kensho or Satori, that affected the whole Sangha for 3 months. That it uplifted or clarified in some way the whole Sangha for 3 months. And this is actually an interesting discussion, the whole topic of dry insight and wet insight. But I'm going to save that topic for later. My point here is that I didn't hear during my time and afterwards my view about the traditional Zen world is that Kenshos or Satoris, these terms are used in different ways or sometimes as a synonyms depending who you ask. I have a very clear definition that anybody can find from the Revitalized Zen blog, where I've discussed the 4 stages of Zen. So when I speak of Kenshos and Satoris, I actually mean 2 quite different things. Yes, further integration with the nature of mind, with Buddha nature, but still the meaning is different. My point is that if Kenshos awakenings occur very rarely in a Sangha, then I think that's a problem. Because what is Kensho? I spoke about this in a video called Practices that Generate Kensho. But what is Kensho? Kensho is seeing our Buddha nature, recognizing our Buddha nature. It is not some special experience. It is the recognition when we see our own Buddha nature. See ourselves as living and breathing Buddhas. So, all Dharma practice is about that. That's the main heart and soul of Dharma practice in general, and Zen here in specifically. So, if you ask me, yes, there is the whole process of integration, having Kenshos, having awakening experience, and then integration period after that. But how could anything else be a priority, be more important than recognizing Buddha nature in Zen, in Chokchen, in Mahamudra, in Theravada, in any type of Buddha Dharma? Nothing is more important. Nothing is more important. How could it be? So yeah. Okay, I'll leave it at that. I've spoken about this a little bit and I'll come back to it in later videos. So when learning about that so many different Buddha Shakyamuni himself, and then many male and female masters after him, when I learned that they had openly discussed and said that they are enlightened, that they have done these practices, followed these methods and attained enlightenment, I realized that what is traditionally done, what is the norm of not speaking about enlightenment, it is actually not how many great masters, including the founder of Buddha Dharma, Buddha Shakyamuni, how he did it. So this whole culture of hush hush, not speaking about the monster, it developed at some point later. Again, it developed like many other traits of the tradition, developed later. It should be very easy to understand, because we see this in society and world around the world all the time, that when a community even if it's a Dharma community. But if there is no strong hold of recognized Buddha nature, then it is inevitable that things start to get distorted and changed, and different not so helpful opinions and ways of doing things come into the picture. So we can see this in the world, in society, all the time. People try their best, they might have best intentions, but somehow the result is a mess. And this is very much the case in Dharma too. So when speaking about traditions, we should always have, we should have a sober understanding what the traditions are. Traditions change, and usually they don't change for the better, but they become diluted, distorted. Different opinions and interpretations, affect the whole mix, and that's how actually traditions change. And in Buddha Dharma, it means that traditions over time get weaker and weaker, more and more affected by delusion, samsara, that repeats itself again and again. Yes. And this is the reason why Buddha Shakyamuni, not sure which sutra he says that, but maybe Pahiyya Sutta, he says that we need to question and analyze anything and everything. So you cannot rely your faith, rely on belief, rely on any external matter. The only thing you can rely on in Buddha Dharma is Buddha nature. And the conduct, the skillful means that are expressions of that Buddha nature. It's that simple, but it's not that simple. My apologies, I don't again know how long I've been talking. Am I making too long of these videos? Yesterday's video was 45 minutes and the previous ones have been half an hour or something like that. But at the same time, I want to make these points very clear. So I will continue this video a little bit by speaking about the core features of pragmatic Dharma. So I will briefly introduce what this pragmatic Dharma is. So in the 90s in US, there was a meditation teacher called Theravada meditation teacher called Bill Hamilton, and he had students like Daniel Ingram and Kenneth Falk, who are quite famous, who started, Bill Hamilton, he openly spoke about his meditative experiences and awakening experiences, and then his students and their students and their students have continued, and this is how the so-called pragmatic Dharma as a not really as a tradition, but as a community and as an online community has developed. So I have here a couple of pages from Vincent Horn. Vincent is American Buddhist meditation and mindfulness teacher, and I'd like to read a couple of pages from his article entitled "The Core Features of Pragmatic Dharma." He has written this, actually this article can be found from one of my books. It's either in What's Next, it's probably in What's Next on Post-Awakening Practice. By the way, I spoke about Philip Kaplow's 3 Pillars of Zen, where there are these accounts, first-hand accounts, and Jaiko Iwasaki's letters of her awakening, her describing what has happened to her, and my books, all free of charge from Amrita Mandala website, are full of such accounts. So, you're welcome to get those books and knock yourself out with this stuff. So Vincent Horn writes like this: Pragmatic Dharma is a modern approach to the path of awakening. It pulls from the time-tested teachings and practices of the Buddhist tradition, but is simultaneously infused with a modern mindset that isn't afraid to tinker with the traditional formulation. Pragmatic Dharma at its core is about asking the question, what works? If something doesn't work, then it's relinquished. If it works, it's used. If something else works better at certain times or for certain people, then we go with that. In that way, pragmatic Dharma is a completely practical way of approaching the spiritual path. That said, this approach begins with the Buddhist tradition as a starting point. Buddhism has one of the most exhaustive collections of theory and practice to help enact spiritual transformation. It's built upon thousands of years of individual experimentation, trial and error, and success. Many people have used this system to train their minds, awaken their hearts, and manifest deep wisdom. For this reason, we use it as a starting point, respecting the deep streams of knowledge that our own exploration rides upon. The relationship of theory and practice. Pragmatic Dharma includes a collection of helpful theories and practices. At the same time, it is a particular way of approaching theory and practice. If we look at the word pragmatic, we see that it stems directly from Western philosophy. This is a description from Wikipedia of one of the defining features of pragmatism in the Western tradition. The pragmatist proceeds from the basic premise that the human capability of theorizing is integral to intelligent practice. Theory and practice are not separate spheres. Rather, theories and distinctions are tools or maps for finding our way in the world. If we look at what theory is, it's essentially an abstraction or representation of direct experience. It's a way for us to take our understanding and transmit through the medium of ideas the same understanding to another person. Language is such an important innovation because it allows us to do this. Because theory is an abstraction or representation without directly experiencing or really understanding what these things are pointing to, abstractions can remain just that. We all know people who confuse concepts about reality with reality itself. One need only bring to mind a know-it-all scholar or nerd to see living examples of what happens when we emphasize theory over practice. The flip side of emphasizing theory over practice is in emphasizing practice over theory. Many people conclude that all you need to do is practice and you'll figure out everything by yourself. But how do you understand why you're practicing or learn to practice? If you emphasize practice too much, you can get what Tibetan meditation master Chogyam Trungpa called dumb meditators. Well, there's all kinds of dumbs. And speaking of Trungpa, I don't personally endorse the man, but what Trungpa called dumb meditators, people who don't understand what they're doing or why. They never really got what they were supposed to be looking for, so they spin out endlessly doing a practice which leads to something interesting, but not to what was intended. Another pitfall of leaving out theory is that we find it difficult to integrate the experiences we've had into their lives. We have trouble because we are rejecting the importance of the thinking mind. Our complex mental abilities and highly developed brains are what make us distinctly human. Without complex thought, it's unlikely that we'd even be able to ask ourselves the important spiritual questions. Homo sapien is Latin for knowing man or a wise man. It can be a disaster if we throw out the wise part of our evolutionary heritage. What's encouraging is that if we can these helpful theories into practice, if we can apply these helpful theories into practice, there's a word missing there, using them as maps to help us find our way, then we get into the business of having direct experiences ourselves. Through doing this, we become internal scientists and can begin to confirm, reject, and even build upon the theories we've been handed. Theories are alive and open-ended, and we can test their validity. They are not the end point, but rather the starting point for an incredible journey. Openness and transparency for the win. The final principle, I left a couple of sections out from Horn's text, so I jumped to the last final principle. The final principle of pragmatic Dharma is that openness and transparency beat out secrecy and dogma every time. When information is accessible, we don't have to reinvent the wheel ourselves. We can quickly learn from others and build upon that learning. And instead of relying on some special empowerment or secret instruction, we all have the information we need to begin. We treat each other like adults who can handle complexity rather than like children who often need information pre-digested for them. Oh gosh, we can see this everywhere. An environment of openness and transparency can also allow us to reveal things about our experience that we might not otherwise reveal. Often our cutting edge lies in the areas that are most difficult to explore or see. When we value openness and transparency, we don't have to be as afraid of going into those areas. There is an incredible power that gets unlocked through doing this. Another thing that happens, especially as a community, if we preference openness and transparency, is that authority begins to become more widely distributed. Instead of authority only being at the top of hierarchy with the founders of a tradition or the senior teachers or lineage holders, authority also rests in the hands of regular people. Everyone who can realize something for themselves and share what they've gleaned is a source of spiritual wisdom. And this massively distributed authority is not a flat, everyone is equal point of view. Rather, it's a naturally flowing hierarchy of knowledge and skill which is inherently dynamic and flexible. Beautiful, isn't it? When everyone in a community is more empowered to learn and share, it creates an incredibly positive feedback loop of enthusiasm, skill, and energy. People become more invested in what they're doing and more empowered to embody their own wisdom. And because we haven't thrown out a recognition of varying levels of depth, there's a constant stream of checks and balances throughout the system, which, if set up properly, can become self-regulating. Of course, this is the ideal, and with all ideals, reality testing again becomes important. But these principles have been enacted well in other systems, and we can learn a lot from them. Indeed, I would say that if we ever want to have a shot at modernizing the path of awakening, we'll have to. So, end of quote from Vince Horn. But I would like to say that I don't think, based on how I view what the ancient masters did, what Buddha Shakyamuni did and said, I don't think this is really a modernization of the path of awakening or revitalization of Zen. It's not inventing something new, it's rather discovering what was done in the first place in ancient times by ancient founding masters. There was something else that I was reminded when I was reading that. Yes, so Vince Horn started this article by saying that what works or what doesn't work is an essential question in pragmatic Dharma, also in Revitalized Zen. And it reminded me of Zen master Joshu, who was an ancient Chinese Zen master, who said something like, he was already, I believe he was very old when he said this, but he said that, oh, excuse me, I had lunch just half hour before, but he said that if a young child has more depth, more understanding that he as an old master has, he will learn from the child. And he also, I believe he said that if an older person than him has more experience and insight and depth, he will also learn from him or her. Totally pragmatic. Priorities straight. So long story short, open discussion and open sharing is, in my experience, very inspiring. It's very supportive, and that's the way how we do it in Amrita Mandala and in Revitalized Zen. Completely open discussion for the benefit of everybody personally involved and for the benefit of all beings. Thank you very much, my friends. You're welcome to send me emails. You can find my email at the comment field below every one of these videos. You are of course welcome to leave comments as well. Again, thank you for the previous comments, and see you in the next video, and hopefully see you in Saturday sessions and Zen retreats, Revitalized Zen retreats beginning next month. On 10th Saturday and 17th, 18th is the first weekend retreat. You can find the events from our Facebook group called Revitalized Zen. So thank you very much and have a nice day. See you in the next one. Cheers.